for about a year as like I call it our COVID side quest.
Oh, okay.
The theme of my life is side quests, and we had gone out to Arizona. We were working obviously remote because we work in the tech industry. And I had been this kind of leads into everything that's going on. I had really been itching to like get super back into the horse world. I grew up really involved. I rodeoed, and my parents, they owned a feed store and like a boarding facility. And so I grew up super involved. And then when it came time to go to college, my whole senior year, my dad was like, "You're selling and everything, and you're going to go to college." And like, that's the deal. And it worked well for me because I was burnt. Like, I just reached the point where I was like, I have no interest in going to rodeos. I've got no interest in going to barrel races. I'm very burnt. I had a lot of other things kind of going on in my life, in terms of like the end of my high school career was definitely different for me than other people just because of some experiences I got to have. And so moved to San Francisco, started working in tech, did that whole thing, and got so involved in tech. And I had actually started riding hunter jumpers just to like be involved in the horse world. Because when you live in San Francisco, showing quarter horses or rodeoing is not a possibility. Like, I was in an office Monday through Friday working 14, 16 hours a day in the tech industry. And so I had been itching to get back into it. And when COVID happened, it was like, well, I'm not in an office anymore. This is kind of the opportunity. And so we booked it out to Arizona just to kind of get involved and get back into things. And first we moved to Scottsdale, and we moved to Arizona to get away from the Bay. And it's like Scottsdale is a worse version of the Bay Area. Like, it is just nouveau riche, like not our style at all. And so went to Tucson one weekend, and we were like, this town's weird. And so just kind of decided to move there. And that was like the COVID side quest. I'm all about, like, people are like, why would you move to Tucson? I was like, I had absolutely no reason to be there. Just felt like a good idea at the time. So yeah, that's where the Arizona sweatshirt comes from, is my Arizona side quest.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense.
So you went into tech. Did you go into tech because that's something you really love, or did you initially go into tech because it seemed like a good avenue of making money?
It was kind of both. So really how I ended up in tech. So when I was in high school, I was a junior in high school, and I had gotten an invite to speak at TEDx San Francisco, which TEDx are independently curated TED events. And the whole reason for that is, when I was a sophomore, I was a high school rodeo queen. I was not a good one, but Lord knows I did it. And it was an interesting experience for me, because obviously I don't look like the traditional rodeo queen, and not even from like the color of my skin perspective, but more so I was like a size 8, which, like, looking back, I'm like, that's so sad that I had any like adversity because I was a size 8, but I did. And it was kind of just like, it was this weird experience where I had never been judged before on like my personality or what I looked like or what my clothes looked like. And I hated it. I was like, this is the stupidest thing we could ever like put anybody through. And so I had started this WordPress. Like, I don't know if you guys remember like WordPress. I had started basically like this WordPress like kind of anonymous blog called Sincerely I'm Not Sorry, where I would just talk about all of the things that I didn't think women or young women should ever have to apologize for. And it did really, really well. It was all anonymous. And the curator at TEDx San Francisco basically reached out to me and was like, hey, we really like this. Like, we know you're anonymous, but would you want to talk? And I was like, yeah, for sure. But I have to ask my mom, because I'm a child. And so I ended up being able to speak there. And that was really life-changing for me. That was probably the most pivotal moment in my life, because up until then, like, my life plan was to grow up and run my dad's feed store and train horses. And that was like the avenue for me. Not to say that that's a bad thing. It's very viable for many people. But, you know, growing up, my dad, he would always just tell me, he's like, you're too smart to run a feed store. Like, you gotta get out of Romus. Like, you're too smart to do this. And that really kind of opened up my world, because before then I had no clue that this industry existed. And the real kind of avenue was that, you know, my senior year, because of that, I had started contracting for a company who, what they did was they ghost wrote speeches for people in the tech industry and people, you know, executives and corporate executives. And they hired me when I was a senior in high school. And I started to kind of write for these tech executives and these startup founders and all of these people. And so I made this decision, like, I'm going to move to San Francisco because there's a lot of money there. There's a lot of opportunity for me. And I made this realization that as a young person, if you're a young person that can show drive and can show promise and a desire, people up here, they want to help you. Like that, I tell young people all the time, I'm like, this is the time to take advantage of getting a hand up and getting a help out, because people want to help eager young people, even more so, like, you know, than an eager 28-year-old. There's nothing better than an eager 18-year-old. And so I moved there, and that's really kind of what my introduction to the industry was. And so I did, you know, I gained a passion for being able to think creatively and being able to solve, like, you know, issues in the world, and being able to build things. But of course, the other half of me that I'm always very transparent about is I realized there was a lot of money to be made if I wanted to make a career in that industry. And I was somebody that I wanted to have horses. And so I was like, if I can just bust ass for a couple of years and make a career, you know, I'll be able to support my dreams and desires. And so it was both. You know, I'm very passionate about what I do now. But there was always times in my career, you know, before I had my own startup and everything, because I worked in the med tech field, where I was like every day, man, I sit in this office and I work with the FDA and I just build mobile applications for medical devices. This sucks. But there was always like a means to an end for me.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So obviously we want to hear more about you, but to give you some background on me, at least, I worked in software for about 4 years before I became a horse trainer full time, and did a lot of building databases. I actually worked with a lot of water utility companies out in California, which was really interesting and eye opening, getting to like see the inner workings of the state of California. But that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's that's really interesting. So did you go straight into tech, or did you go to school, or was
So
how did that work?
I was doing both. I went straight into tech. So the day I graduated high school, I flew to Europe to speak at another TEDx event. And I spent the summer in Europe kind of, you know, working with some companies and doing some things out there. And then I moved straight home, and I started college. I was studying political science. I really wanted to be an attorney at that point in time. But I was working at the same time because I just had to. And I was working in tech. I was doing a lot of contracting. And I always say I hated college. I hated it. From the moment I got there, I was like, this is a scam. It just wasn't for me. And I ended up leaving college as a sophomore. And you know, the reason why I left college initially was, as a sophomore, I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And so I had made this choice to kind of take like 6 months off of school, to get a handle on my health. But reflecting, there was no way in hell I was ever going to graduate. Like, it was not going to happen. If it hadn't been epilepsy, it would have been something else. Because it was just like not for me, I'm not a classroom person. I obviously did well in the classroom in terms of getting grades and getting to school and you know, all of those sorts of things. But I was like, this is not necessary, especially when you start making money. And I was making good money. I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Every second I sit in the classroom is like another dollar I could be making working for some exec writing a speech for him. This does like not make any sense for me. So I was doing both. But the college, I was very much so not the most active participant.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense. So I guess you were working in tech and maybe, so like I went to Virginia Tech and like got an engineering degree, but it wasn't necessarily, even though you were in tech, it wasn't necessarily the STEM side. You were working, like you were talking about, like writing speeches and kind of the more, I don't know. How would you describe your job? Was that it, like speech writing to start at least?
Yeah. So yeah, to start, I was doing a lot of like speech writing. So I was
Mm-hmm.
working in the industry, but I obviously wasn't working on like the technical side of things. I was working with tech executives to write speeches. And then my first position actually working at a tech company, it was a biotech company. Um, and it was just straight up digital marketing, doing a lot of like SEO and back end marketing, a lot of content. I mean, it's startups, right? Like in a startup, if you say you work in marketing, you're legit doing everything. I was doing everything from
Right.
designing the banners that were going up at conferences to writing our blog articles. And so that was like the first bulk of my career. And then after that, I went into product, which was like, you know, product design and product development. So yeah, my career, it didn't start out technical, and then like
Mm-hmm.
slowly I kind of inched my way more into the technical side of things in product.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm tracking now. That makes a lot of sense. And so, well, before we move on, Ben, do you have any questions about that? Because I'm going to keep pushing the story along if that's cool with you.
No, you're good.
Not really. Not besides the fact that I think you're the first person, Michelle, that I've talked to that is a speech writer. When you first started doing that, so what kind of speeches are you writing? Are you writing like presentations for people? Like I'm familiar, with obviously we have folks that do like political speech writing. How much, I don't know, what was your biggest challenge with that? Because you're writing for someone else, right? Is it a big deal or
Yeah.
is this really simple and I'm just totally overthinking it? It sounds kind of cool though. You'd be
No,
writing a
no,
speech
no.
for someone else to
It's
give.
It's cool. You know, it was there. Some of it was like as simple as like I would get some, you know, founder at some like pre-seed or seed startup who was, you know, needing to like either pitch to investors or just work with investors. And like that would be like really simple for me. Like that was like, dude, come on, like you're hiring me for this. Like, but let's sit down and talk about it. And like half of my job, I would say probably 70% of my job was literally writing the content. Another 30% was teaching these people, okay, this is what you're going to do to deliver the message. But then I also got to work on like some really cool, you know, projects for more, you know, TED related events or like very large scale tech conferences where people were going to be delivering like a keynote speech. And that would be kind of more of the storytelling side of things. You know, a massive problem that a lot of founders, a lot of engineers and, you know, people in the tech industry have is they're so technical and what they're doing is so technical that they often lose the storytelling aspect of it. Of
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you could be talking about something as simple as like launch a computer chip and you can totally lose everybody in it if you don't tell the story aspect of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, you know, it's for me, storytelling was there. Like I know where I get it from. I get it from my dad. My dad could tell a story better than anybody. And so it's just like it was really fun for me. Honestly, like I had a ball of a time like being able to just kind of meet with somebody and like get like maybe 20 minutes of them being like, "Well, I want to make sure I deliver this, this and this." And then I'd be like, "Dude, give me 2 weeks. I'll get you a 30-minute keynote." Um And that was always like really exciting, is like, I love being able to make people feel something,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to, lead people to finding inspiration in the most mundane of things, even if it's just something as simple as like somebody talking about a product. I think that there's like so much more to that. So it was simple, and like the job itself was very simple. It was go write content and help people deliver it. Um, but there were certain challenges. One, when you're like 17, 18 years old, and like somebody's boss hires some girl and they're like, hey, this chick's going to come in and help you write. And then a literal child, a literal fetus shows up and it's like, hey, dude, you're 45 and went to Harvard and I'm going to write you something today. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
so that was something I wanted to ask you about, because that was the exact situation I was envisioning when you were talking about this.
yeah,
Like, to have an 18-year-old come and coach some, not even, I don't know, if I'm imagining myself, like you said, as this like 45-year-old founder or whatever it is. If I've got some like whiz kid coming in to show me some like brand new chunk of code or something crazy like that, I'm gonna be like, all right, great, all for it. But at least in my mind, and maybe it says more about me than like the actual situation, it would be a lot harder when it's like, okay, 17-year-old girl, come in and like tell me how to like, I know it's a storytelling and it's and there's delivery, but it's, to me, it's kind of like a vital part of being a leader is having that skill set you talk about.
yeah,
Um, and so to get coached up on that, who's someone who maybe on the surface doesn't appear to have a lot of life experience or a lot of
yeah,
achievements under their belt. I guess my question off of that, are these TED Talks, was that kind of what gave you the rapport to come in and do that in the first place? Was, you traveled to other
yeah.
continents to give speeches?
Yeah, that was definitely it. Like, I will also like, I would say 5% of my career has been spent receiving like disrespect or feeling as if I had to prove myself to somebody who might like underestimate me. But like 95% of it has just been like, kind of just walking into a room and being like, all right, like this is what we're gonna do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think obviously I got to really hit the ground running with my speech at TEDx San Francisco. TEDx San Francisco was like a very well respected event. Um, and that talk did very well. There was like 5,000 people in the room that day, and it did very well, and it landed. And um, I think like I kind of just like in that moment almost proved myself. I think one, people always assumed I was a little bit older, though I have always had on my side that I look very young. So like when I was 17, I looked 17. There was no
Mm-hmm.
way I was going to get away with it. I've always looked hell, I'm 26 now and I got kicked out of bar 2 weeks ago because they thought I was underage. But so, there was that, and I think it just came down to like when you're at the point where you're having to hire somebody to help you because you don't know how to deliver a speech, like you're not going to stand on a pedestal at that point, is kind of
Sure.
like how I felt. And a lot of the time, like these people were coming to me as recommendations. And somebody else had, I remember the first person that I ever wrote for, that I did a paid gig for, he was there the day that I gave my speech at TEDx San Francisco. And he was like, all right, I've seen what the woman can do. And he just really needed help, and it went really well. And like from there, it was like, it was coming off of recommendations. And so it was like, if you have a friend telling you, hey, this chick knows what the hell's going on,
Mm-hmm.
it really works. And obviously I had that kind of that company backing me, and that, they were using me to contract me out. So
Okay, that makes sense
yeah,
too. Yeah,
yeah, it was,
yeah.
it is what it is. I think too, like if you demand a room,
Mm-hmm.
and you do it well, like you're probably going to get it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's really cool. But I could see where there might be, at least on the surface, some assumptions to overcome from the people you're helping. But
Yeah.
obviously it worked out for you. So that's great.
Yeah.
So from that point on, because obviously that's not what you do now,
Yeah.
you moved to Tucson, yada, yada. At some point you stop doing that for a living, right? So do you want to talk about
Yes.
that next?
Yeah. Shall we talk about my great exodus?
Yeah.
Sure. Love to hear about it.
Yeah. As we kind of merge into the TikTok side of things, and how that really changed things for me. Yeah, so basically I end up, I had moved off from the speech writing, and then I worked at a startup company, and then I went corporate for a little while, and then I was, my last position working for somebody else was back in a med tech company. It was a startup company. And they had hired me as a head of product. So at this point, I had kind of moved my career into the product development side of things. It was a UK based company who had been kind of moving some efforts over into California. Do I need to wait for him to come back?
No, you're good. I can still hear you.
Okay, cool. I had totally lost where I was. Anyway, yeah, so this company, they had started to kind of move themselves into the US market, so they had brought me on. And I had been there for 8 months at this point. And around this same time, my TikTok had really started to pick up. I think at the time that I got fired, I had 90,000 followers, and I had started really posting consistently and had started TikTok in June. So there was about 3 month period where I went from about like 5,000 followers to 90,000 followers. And I was just making horse comedy. Like it was all horse themed, but most of my videos that had gone viral were all comedy videos. Whether about horses or, one of them had kind of been like about like my relationship or something like that. I was making these comedy videos, and I had an inkling that the company was aware of my TikTok presence only because I had a coworker who was actually based in the UK. Like maybe a month prior was like, you came up on my For You page. And I was like, this is the beginning of the end. Like, I know how this goes with, having a social media presence and also having, working in the tech industry, and med tech is very conservative in comparison to the rest of the tech industry. Like people talk about the tech industry and like how chill it is and how relaxed it is. That is not med tech. Like that shit's legit and like kind of scary. Like it's even the startups, you're corporate. And I was young, right? I was very young for the business position that I had. And so I knew that I had like this kind of standard to uphold. But at the same time, like I have never been good at keeping it conservative and 100. Like that's just not ever been my style. I say whatever I want to say. Like I am who I am. So I knew they were watching, and I was like, at some point, probably going to get like, who knows, reprimanded for saying fuck online. Like that's just kind of how I felt about it. But nonetheless, I was doing like really good at my job. Was crushing it. Like literally the week prior to being fired, I had gotten a raise. My board of directors loved me. My CEO loved me. It was a good sized company. Anyway, we get to the grand firing, and a big question is always like, how did you get fired, or what's the video that got you fired? Because I had to delete the video due to I didn't want to get sued. I was being threatened to get sued. Basically, this is what happened. The video was such. It was very quick. It was about a 17-second video. Now, I was working UK hours at the time. And so my stand-up meeting, which in tech lore, a stand-up meeting is literally just like a general daily checkup meeting before the day starts. That's what stand up is, but tech has to give a fucking name to everything. So stand up for me was always around like 3:30, 4 in the morning, California time. I'm sitting in the meeting with my chief product officer, the rest of the product marketing, the product and marketing teams that kind of had us combined. And the chief product officer is like having a conversation with some other girl, whatever. Well, I had been making a cup of coffee at this point in time. And I look up and I realize I hadn't put my mug underneath my Keurig. Like, so my coffee was like all over the floor, all over the ground. I'm like, oh, fucking typical. Like this is what happens when you take meetings at 3:30 in the morning. So I go over and I take my phone out. I had put myself on mute. Mind you, I have nothing to do with the current conversation that's happening in the meeting. I take my phone out. I record the coffee. I turn my phone around and I'm like, fuck, that's it. I upload the video. I think nothing of it. I go about my day. Next day, it's about 3:00 in the afternoon. I'm tip-tapping away, just working away. No inkling of anything. Mind you, the video has done nothing. It's got like 14,000 views, which like my TikTok at that point was really popping off. I was getting hundreds of thousands of views on everything. So like we're low numbers on this. HR messages me like, hey, you got time for a quick little 5-minute meeting? I'm like, Debbie, anything for you. I love you. You're my work bestie. I log on. My chief product officer sitting there. And I'm like, all right, something happened. And they're like, hey, this video was sent to us and, you could hear the meeting in the background. And I'm like, yep, okay. And they're like, yeah, we are immediately letting you go for gross negligence. And I was like, I'm sorry, you're firing me? And my chief product officer was just like, fuck, he was raging. Like he was just like red in the face. And it was like, yeah, you're fired. You're done. Like today is your last day. Here's your severance package. Get fucked. And I was like, all right. It was great working with all of you guys. and I shut my laptop and I was like, oh. And I just called downstairs to Kevin and I said, I just got fired. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yep. And so I quickly got on TikTok and I like found the video and I like play it and I'm like, yeah, you can hear their like voices in the background, but whatever, which I would like to acknowledge. I have never been angry with the firing. Like, I was always like, yeah, not your best moment, Michelle. Like, you're a dumbass and you got fired for that. Whatever. I was in the wrong, made a mistake. Was it fire-worthy? Apparently to them, yes. I don't know. I have like kind of my assumptions that maybe they were just like, hey, we're going to cut this off now, seeing as like, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that was just the incident they needed, but they were leaning that way.
That was the incident they needed, but nonetheless, and yeah, I hyperventilated for like, I don't know, 7 minutes, and lost it. And then I just looked at Kevin and I said, I'm really sorry that I'm about to say this because I know I just lost, a couple $100,000 a year. But I have never felt better. I was like, I have never been so relieved in my entire life that I do not have to log back on tomorrow. Like, I mean, I loved my job because I was working on something really cool. But I was like, oh my God, it's over. Like, it just felt like 7 years of my career had like come to this like weird conclusion. And yeah, I was like, well, now what?
Real quick, Ben, I know I was going in and out. Like I heard most of your story, Michelle, but I don't know if it's my internet or someone else's. Ben, I just wanted to make sure we were still recording.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
I dropped off at one point too, because you dropped on and then somebody here did something and our internet completely crashed. and then we came back on. So we dropped off around a little over 20 minutes.
Ben and I live in very rural areas,
Yeah.
and our internet is not conducive to hosting a podcast.
No, you're good. It never stopped recording, so I was like, I'll just roll with it,
Oh
and they
yeah,
can
I
make a
logged back
cut
on,
that
and I was
needed.
like, oh, she's a champ, because neither of us are on right now, and you just kept talking, and I was like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Public
Yeah.
speaking. That's
Well,
I was like,
she asked
it's
briefly
fine.
at the
Nobody
beginning.
needs
She
to
said,
know.
do I
Just
need to
roll.
wait till he comes back? And I was like, no, you're good. And she kept on going. Michelle, actually, what is your clock at right now? Perfect.
30:54.
You're the only one that knows how long
That's
we've
great.
been doing this for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so
Yeah, we're
while
good.
we're talking about the TikTok thing, when did you come up with the handle "broke ass horse girl"? It sounds like you were balling. You were doing pretty
Oh
good.
my
So is that just
God,
like an
this
oxymoron?
it haunts me. No, yes. Yes. So broke ass horse girl has always been my handle from the moment I made a TikTok. And I always like to add, I never intended on becoming a quote unquote TikToker. It actually like plagues me to this day. Like when people will be like, this is Michelle, she's a TikToker. I'm like, cut it. But yeah, broke ass horse girl was just like kind of an oxymoron. Some people fail to catch that. I get comments literally all the time that are like, oh, must not be so broke if
Yeah.
you have this, this, and this. And I'm like, literally, your point, like that's the point. Say it again, but slower. But yeah, it kind of just like caught on, and then the people were vibing with it. And at this point, I'm like, well, I can't change it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
I gotta
Yeah,
keep
it's your
it.
brand
a lot
now.
of needy people out there. So at the point though, when you got fired, and I guess we're still talking about that, but were you doing TikTok at the level where you felt like it was turning into a career? Because again, you're the only person we've ever talked to, and the only person I've really talked to who is like a serious TikToker. And it's kind of cool because, like Joe said, not only do we live in kind of rural areas, but like personally, I lead somewhat of a rural life until we started doing the podcast. And a lot of my friends are
Yeah.
horse trainers or construction people or like older folks or whatever. I just haven't been around someone who did that. So, but it's obviously a viable career. Like people do TikTok. In fact, they're doing quite well, right? So did you ever get to the point where you felt like, oh, maybe I can have a TikTok career?
It definitely like, it was at the point where I was like, yeah, I could do this. But I will always like say like I would never solely do TikTok. I would never. First of all, TikTok in the equine Western industry, social media in the equine and Western industry does not pay unless you are like monetizing a product, something that you can literally sell. It does not pay. If you talk to a Western influencer who's like, I'm making this money and this money from this brand and this brand, liar. It doesn't pay. This industry doesn't pay. It's very similar to where other industries were. If you look at like maybe say surfing 15 years ago, we're about in the same position in terms of the kind of great rebrand that surfing went to it through. But yeah, it definitely like I was not gonna just only do TikTok because one, it just doesn't really pay if you're not going outside of the niche. And which like for me at that point in time, I was going outside of the niche. I was kind of playing to multiple different audiences, not just the horse world. I've since reframed to really, I only give a rat's ass about making content for the horse world. I only really care about my niche. But yeah, it's just like really terrifying. And I think for me, the joy of TikTok comes in having the like independence to create the content that I want. And so one, like making it a full-time job sounded incredibly just stressful because I know people who do it full-time and the hustle that they have is insane. But two, I was already fully aware of it at that point in time. I'm not brand safe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one, my username isn't even brand safe. There are multiple brands who are like, we would love to work with you. You're going to have to change your handle. And I'm like, pass. If I ever change my handle, just know I'm broke. Like, if you guys see me changing my handle and pushing some crazy shit, I'm
sold
broke.
out.
But yeah, I just like, I'm not brand safe. I obviously, I love to say fuck. I am possibly seen from some as aggressive. And yeah, I kind of just was like, if I really want to make this a paid thing, I'm going to have to really reel it in. And I've never been interested in reeling it in. So for me, I was like, let's utilize this as an avenue to get to the other things that we want.
Oh, that makes sense. All right. Well, let's talk about that then, because I know. So when Joe mentioned you, actually, it was funny because Joe mentioned that we were going to have you on because he kind of does all of our organizing for the guests. And he started describing who you were going to be as a guest, but he didn't mention any name. And I was like, oh, is it that broke-ass horse girl? He's like, yeah, how'd you know? And we like share the same Instagram account for On the Move. And I had seen that he had started following you. And I was like, well, because what you're describing is that girl. So I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, we were talking a little bit about what your current project is. So could you talk about, I guess, let us know if there's something that bridged between that and the project you're doing now. But continue onward, I guess.
Yeah, no. And I will say, I'm so sorry. I'm such
you're
a
on
talker.
A podcast.
I always
That's totally fine.
That's kind of the point.
I know, but I always I take it so far that I'll leave a podcast and I'm like, fuck, they didn't say anything. It was just me rambling for 4 hours. Yeah, no. So basically, the story of Bridal as it currently stands. So Bridal itself, as it currently exists, it's an all-in-one equine business management tool. So the purpose of the platform is that we could have combined all of the normal business tools that I use every single day in kind of the startup world, all into one singular platform. So equine professionals that use us, they are able to track all their finances, manage, time cards, manage their employees, manage their schedules, set up automated booking links, manage all of their horses, all of their records, send invoices, receive direct payments, all in one single platform, all under one single subscription every single month. And, I had been thinking about Bridal for a few years at this point. And, I would like to mention in 2020 was kind of my co-founder and I's, it was our first stab at things. And originally what we really wanted to build was a better online auction system for horses. Like that was the original plan for Bridal. And, I have two co-founders who I always say, like, one piece of advice, always work with people that are smarter than you. And, I had known my co-founders for a few years and I knew I wanted to build something with them. I had worked with both of them, in other aspects on contracts and things like that. And so at the time that we started kind of, I guess, Bridal 1.0, Ty, our now CTO, he was, head of engineering at another company called Do Not Pay, which is a very successful legal tech and legal AI company. And then Matt, my other co-founder at the time, he was at a venture capital fund called Magic. And what Magic is it's a venture capital fund ran by founders. And so it's a very successful fund. They've invested millions of dollars into other companies in Silicon Valley. And then I was also at the time working at a very large pharma company. And basically, so to speak, at the time that we started Bridal, even though it was the one thing that I wanted to do, we were all individually working like 14 hours a day on our day jobs. And for me, I was like, the money is literally just too good for me to take this jump and be a founder. Like that was flat out. I was like, I have no time in my day. I've got all these horses to ride. I want to have some version of a life and the money's good. And so like maybe one day we'll be founders or I'll be a founder. And so We kind of dropped that project, but the whole time, like, I have always thought that the equine world lacks good technology. And I mean this in every single facet. And I will say with my whole chest that the technological solutions that are available in the equine world, whether it's in barn management software or how we run our events or how we sell horses, it's not good. It does not match up with the amount of money that exists in the industry. So I'd always known that I had wanted to kind of build something.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got fired, kind of my immediate thought was, fuck, like maybe this is my time to start a company. I'm very fortunate. And I always like to acknowledge this, that I am in the financial position to take that risk. And that is something that is the biggest blocker for a lot of people. Is that, I was kind of able to, it was my partner, Kevin, who was like, dude, do it. We can do it. Do it. And so that's really kind of where the idea for like Bridal 2.0 started to come up with, is, okay, can we build a better solution for professionals to begin running their businesses, for professionals to be able to track their invoices? Because like the amount of money that equine professionals lose simply from poor bookkeeping tactics is insane. And it was something that like I noticed even just as an amateur, right? Who hired a lot of professionals, the amount of people who I was always going, dude, you got to invoice me so I can pay you. Whether it was, farriers or trainers or whoever. And that's, where the idea came from. And so I really just I gathered Matt and Ty, who were both working full time on projects at that point in time. And I knew Matt was just burnt out as all hell, because that's what Silicon Valley will do to you. That's how I felt. And, I had kind of gotten him involved in the horse world, and that I would just literally be like, yo, Matt, leave San Jose and come ride horses with me. And, he kind of started to understand the industry through that way. And so that's really where things came from. And it was like this perfect culmination of the fact that, a lot of the times the hardest part for startup companies when it comes to acquiring business is CAC cost, which is CAC is customer acquisition costs. And I had somehow already built a little bit of a platform of, 100,000 people that were following me that liked horses. And so it was like, oh, well, what if our CAC was 0? And so, really kind of what I did was we built this landing page for Bridal. We didn't have a product. We knew what we wanted it to be. We had some product specs, some product design. We built a landing page. I got on TikTok and I recorded this video of, yo, I got fired and now I'm going to do this. And it went viral. And for that initial product, we got like 1,200 early request signups in about 48 hours. And that was fantastic because the number one thing that investors want to see is, well, is there a demand for the product?
Mm-hmm.
And I went, yeah. And it just so happens that I already built an incredible email list, an incredible community to market to. So yeah, it was like this perfect kind of culmination to get to doing what I had always wanted to do.
Well, let me back you up for a minute because I want to talk about the part where you were talking about how the horse industry is pretty behind technologically. And in comparison to the amount of money that's in the horse industry. And so I'd like you to kind of share your thoughts on why you think that is, but also, the dilemma we would have, I would say, is you have a lot of folks who want better technology in the horse industry, and then you have a lot of other folks who see no reason for it. Like you had a great example of, as a horse owner, you have a service provider come, you have the farrier come, maybe you have a trainer, you have a horse hauler, even horse haulers. I've been very surprised with that. They want to just get paid, handshake, maybe sign a little piece of paper, you give them a check or you Venmo them and that's it. And they go off down the road. And it's a weird loophole. Like, let's say you're a horse transporter, you can get away with quite a bit. Like you might even be running, you know, a DOT authority and insurance and all that. And you can have the shoddiest paperwork on earth. It's ridiculous. Or you can have like fake numbers and missed scales and all that. But what happens sooner or later is something's going to happen. Something's going to go sideways. Your books are going to be totally wrecked, and, you know, you're going to take a big hit. And so there's really no reason why someone shouldn't want better technology. And then from a horse trainer standpoint, you know, you're pulling your hair out. Sometimes just trying to keep your books or remembering who's coming next month, or if you have room for horses coming next month, or who owes what. And it's pretty ridiculous. So you don't have to convince me that we need better technology, but I know there's folks out there that probably need a good reason why they should get on board with something like that, because they clearly like the handshake deal thing, which is not a problem, but it's funny. Like, I could see carpenters wanting to do handshake deals because, like, they're building real things for consumers. And but like in the horse industry, a lot of times as a producer, we're working for people and it's their hobby. It's not even like a product or service, right? And those folks are trying to deduct that on their taxes, especially a lot of the folks, if you work for good clients, right? They're wealthy enough. That means a lot to them to keep track of that. And so, but somehow as horse trainers, I think it's easy to view ourselves as like so simple and old fashioned that, you know, we just need to scribble it down on a piece of cowhide and shake hands and we're good to go. So if you would just talk about why you think that is. We got a little delay, but don't worry about that, or a little echo. But also, just with that in mind, that there's people listening who are probably on board with having better tech. And there's also people listening who are like, I don't want freaking better tech. I want a flip phone and, you know, a pad of yellow paper, you know?
Yeah. And it's like, I have a love for both. You know, I think that's one thing that, like, I've been, you know, very forward with, because, you know, there's people that I'll talk to about it and they'll go, oh, I would never use that. And I'm like, that's okay. Because it's a $300 billion industry. So even if I can only get 1% of you to process through me, that's all I need in order to have a viable company and a viable product. And so I think that there's place in the industry for the traditional way of doing things. And it's like that in every industry. It's like that in every SMB. There are going to be those who don't take advantage of the technological solutions, and their businesses will run just fine and they will live life just as well. They might pull out their hair more so than they need to, but they'll continue to exist well. I think one massive issue with this industry, and it's something that, you know, we saw in like construction, we've seen in the wellness industry, is that they are very niche industries, right? The horse industry, while it's $300 billion, while there's a lot of horse people, it's very niche. And so you run into this problem of, oftentimes when the technology has been built for the horse industry, it has been built by a horse person with no technological experience. And therefore, the product ends up truly not being that great. Because oftentimes, you know, they'll outsource the engineering, and while they have an incredible grasp on what the product needs to be, it's really hard to deliver that to the finish line if you don't know, you know, how to build a product and who to work with, right? So there's that aspect of things. And then you get the other side of things where you'll have some technologists come in and they'll be like, hey, I really want to build this product for the horse world. But they don't know anything about horses, and they don't understand horse people, and they don't know how to talk to people and how to market to horse people. And so it ends up really not being that great of a product, and they're not able to penetrate the market due to the fact that they don't know anybody. And, you know, the horse world has it has a great ability to not always like outsiders. And so, you know, it ends up really not being that conducive. And so, like, I feel as, you know, though, that the kind of our secret sauce is that we've combined incredible technological experience. Like, my CTO, Ty, love the man. He's just a genius. He's very smart, and he's built incredible products. With the fact that, like, I really, really care about the horse industry, and I've been around it quite a bit. And so I'm really kind of able to understand the product and able to understand, you know, the customer, and thankfully, you know, trust is a huge thing in why new products have issues with penetrating the market. But I've been able to build trust for the product through a different avenue, in that I've built trust through myself, with my followers online. And so it's like really this kind of great mix up of things. And, you know, I always tell everybody, well, I don't want, would it be a perfect world if every single person used bridle? Yes. In the same way that it would be a perfect world for Uber if every single person in the world used Uber. But that's not the case. And so I go back to, well, if I can get this X amount of people processing this X amount, I've got this great kind of viable company, and I'm able to kind of make my small change in the horse world for those that want to use the product. And so that's really kind of my mindset surrounding things. And, you know, I always tell people I love to take the small business customer service approach, but I love to use the Silicon Valley and big business approach to how we build and how we scale and how I see our company kind of growing and getting our customer acquisition.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think a lot of times people think that a small business is somehow completely separate from a big business, when really a lot of times it is scalable. Absolutely. And that's where I see like your product. I still don't know a ton about it besides what you've told me, right? But I'm sure it would be very beneficial for anybody trying to scale their business right off the bat. You know, a lot of people, you're only one guy, and when you're in the horse industry, the only thing that's going to get done is what you do. And the last thing you need is all that extra stuff that something like a program like yours can take care of. And so at this point, how much have you been able to get done? Do you guys have a website, or is it being received well?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So we kind of, you know, we really launched, I guess, we started working on things in March of last year, and we did a private beta. So we didn't just like go to the market with the product. We got about 30 customers that worked with us, and we went to beta. And then in August, we did our big kind of national launch. And so we've got a full-fledged product. Originally, we were running on desktop and mobile web. And, you know, we've got a couple hundred customers that use us, both business accounts, and we've also built individual accounts for just like your amateur horse owner who wants to kind of keep track of all of their records and their expenses and all those things for, again, tax write-offs. And then in early February, we launched our mobile app. So now we are both on Apple and Android for the App Store. We've got people who use us on desktop, and, you know, obviously, you know, we're always kind of changing and redesigning. And like I said, I love to take the small business approach. And so like my customers, you know, we've got a couple hundred of them now, but like I know all of them, and, you know, I love to check in with them, and I love to take like personal requests. So a lot of our new features, like we send out new feature emails all the time. We're always building new things. We've got a couple devs working on with us now. Those are all like personal requests, like our timesheet. You know, we have an ability for people to use us to have their employees clock in and clock out with us. That came from a personal request from a barn in Tucson who was like, hey, do you guys have this feature? And I was like, no, but if you give me 3 weeks, I will build it for you, and I'll get it launched right out to you. And so that's really the approach that we've taken. And now actually where we're at, now that we're kind of happy with our barn management tool, we're going to continue to nurture it. We've got a couple more features coming out here and there, a couple integrations. We're actually working on now building our next product, which is for event management. So building a platform for producers to be able to manage their events and allow competitors to kind of do things. It's our aim is to be the cheapest on the market while also being the best on the market.
Yeah. So you mentioned event management a minute ago, back when you were talking about just the horse industry lagging in general in terms of technology. Could you give some examples where you see, you know, a real need in the event management space?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, within barrel racing, there's a couple event management platforms, and then it gets a little bit less in, you know, the English industry. There's one kind of large event management platform, but the platform itself is like kind of older. The UX is not that great. You know, similar to what we've got available to us in rodeo and everything like that. Like the platforms, they work. but the engineering is not that great. And there's, lots of capabilities that aren't included, such as like automatic payouts. Cutting checks is time consuming. It's expensive. Then you have to worry about postage. You have to worry about checks getting lost in the mail. You have to worry about contestants inevitably posting their checks online with your routing and account number right on the check. And there's producers all the time that have issues with that. And so, there's areas where it's like, well, if you just had a little bit better of engineering, it could be better. And then it comes down to a lot of the options that producers are currently using are very expensive. I would even argue, like, as somebody like coming from a fintech background, like it's almost highway robbery. And so, for me, it's like, well, less time doing administrative work when they already have the headache of inevitably having to deal with horse people, which love them. I am one, but we can be a huge pain in the ass. And that's not a problem I can fix with any form of technology. That's just going to be how it exists for the rest of time. And so how can I lessen the burden of their administrative work, make things a better and more seamless experience for the competitors and also the producers, and then make it cheaper and make it affordable? Because producers, I think people a lot of the times, they think that these producers are just taking home this big cash load. And they're not. Once they pay out all of the expenses that come along with managing a large scale event, and then they manage their payouts, they're not taking that much home, and then they're having to give a huge portion of that cost over to their event management system. And so for us, it's like, well, let's just build better and less expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right, let's pause for just a moment. Michelle, can you still see Joe?
No,
okay.
I have not had him for a long
good,
time.
because I couldn't see him either.
Can you guys not hear me?
But he was really quiet, so I texted him and I said, "Are you still on?" And he said he is. Hey guys, let's talk about steel buildings for a minute. Maybe you've looked into making one, building one on your place. Maybe you saw the price tag and that scared you off. Maybe just the sheer amount of work and effort, planning, all that good stuff that goes into it has kept you from going ahead and building on your property. Well, now's a great time to get a free quote from a great company. Head over to www.metalmdi.com/on-the-move. And our friends at Metal Material Direct have a free online configurator. You can plug in all your details, dimensions, specifications, colors, windows, dormers, all kind of cool stuff. And you can see the building and get a free quote. If you head over there now and tell them that the guys from On the Move sent you, you can get a massive discount on your building. And we're talking American steel. This is top quality stuff, guys, and a great company. They also offer fencing, a really cool fencing solution. It's octagon pipe with bolt together connectors. So don't miss out on this. If you have wanted to build, need a building, or building fence, building an arena, just anything ranch, farm, or commercial related, head on over to www.metalmdi.com/on-the-move and tell them that the guys from On the Move sent you.
I think technical difficulties always like really fits into the theme of horse people, like in horse things, really well. So I love it personally. I love like when I take customer calls with our customers and like I'm trying to help them kind of get through something or figure out something, and they're in the barn and like it's like really spotty Wi-Fi, and I'm like, this is exactly who I'm building for. And I love it.
I'm glad we can reaffirm those stereotypes.
Yeah, but you don't have to try to make us feel better about it, because frankly, after this will be 88 episodes when this comes out, we would love to not ever deal with this again. We have, I don't know about you, Joe, but I have zero nostalgia for bad service at this point.
I'm not nostalgic about it at all.
Yeah, we're going to get Starlink satellites as soon as we have the chance or something.
Yep.
Yeah. So a thought I've had while you're talking about all of this, Michelle, someone we've had on here as a regular guest is a guy named Cliff Williamson. and he was the director of health and regulatory affairs for the American Horse Council for about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he's quite the conversationalist, like most people who work in DC are. But one thing he did mention to me one time when we were just talking about kind of, I guess you'd say, the technology in the horse world.
Mm-hmm.
And he said from where he was at, from his director position, he was like, I get calls, if not every day, 100% every week about people starting up, trying to do some sort of horse startup, whether it's in the racehorse industry, whether they're going to try to, be the new database some breed association uses or whatever it is. And he said, I'll be honest with you, man, 99% of them fail. And by the time they are like 10 minutes in a conversation with me, I'm like, this is going to fail. And I don't want to be like that. I want there to be success and growth in the horse industry, but it's very easy to see the writing on the wall when they start talking to you. And obviously we don't think you're a failure. But I think it's safe to say it's early still, right? In terms of like the long game with bridle. One thing I think, you alluded to it, having tech experience and the horse experience, but even more so than that, you were talking about your job working with the FDA, and I don't know with what bridle does right now, how much you really had to get into that, but I could see, if you wanted to get into, I don't know what bridle does, but if you got more into like the vet record side or the horse transport side,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, the red tape just starts popping up everywhere.
Yeah.
So obviously you have some experience with that if you were already dealing with the FDA, but can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know that has been a challenge for other people in the past, just getting through all these barriers and regulation. And it might not even be, some of it could be federal regulation, but,
Yeah.
Going forward in the future, it could be other groups, like other associations that are putting this regulation, that have kind of, in a way, kept the horse industry back from what it could be in terms of how technologically advanced it is.
Yeah. So I think we can touch on a couple of things here. Like, one, 99% of startups fail, whether it's in the horse industry or in the software industry or anything. The truth of the matter is most fail. And so I think every founder, or at least for myself, thinks that they're going to strike it big. And I would love for that to be the case. And I think we're really on to something. But I'm also quite understanding of the fact that it could fail tomorrow. And, we have those conversations amongst ourselves all the time of what do we do if it doesn't work out? Pivot. And so there's that. And I think, one reason why I perceive a lot of the companies that pop up in the horse world as startups fail is for a couple of reasons. One, I think a lot of the time the tech is just not that good because they don't have a good group of technologists and developers backing them. And so if you don't have good tech, you can't get anywhere. Two, I think that a lot of the times, frankly, people give up. One, I think they give up because, again, this industry is hard. There's a lot of naysayers. I come across them all the time. Trust me, I've had more people tell me to go fuck myself than I've had people go, hey, this is fantastic. And so you can give up really, really quickly. But, what I've seen in Silicon Valley, if you think about MailChimp, they existed for 25 years before they IPO'd. 25 years. He never took $1 of outside investment money. Now, I can't say that. I've raised six figures in funding from Silicon Valley, which I think that's another reason why a lot of horse-related startups don't do well, is because they never get venture backing. And as somebody who has seen people bootstrap, that shit gets old real quickly. And so we went out and we raised backing from, people in Silicon Valley and from venture capital funds, which gives us the ability to have, we've got runway. We could operate and not make a dime, which we are making money. But we could operate and not make a dime, for a set period of time, and it would be totally fine. And so I think, that's another one of the reasons is like straight up people give up. And, I always operate in the fact that there are so many companies in Silicon Valley who raise millions of dollars, and they either, one, never make a dime and shut down after raising millions of dollars, and they're valued at this and they're valued at that. Or there's tons of companies who raise millions of dollars and they don't get acquired for 20 years because it's just like this long game of you chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. And I think that the horse industry is an incredible representation of that there's going to be a lot of red tape. And I already know there is, especially, there's a reason why we've chosen not to tackle, veterinary first. There's a grand reason for that, because if I wanted to do that, that's not the right approach to the industry for myself. And so, that's an area that we want to get into. And there are startup companies who, there's one startup company in particular. They're not here in the United States. They're outside of the US. They've raised quite a bit of capital. Their veterinary system. And they've done a great job of cutting through that red tape, and they were very particular in how they did it. And so I think, this industry, while it sucks because there's a lot of red tape, and there's also just like, people in this industry can make it real hard to get places because they're like very protective of their contacts, and they're very protective of trying new things. And, there's a lot of older people that are like, well, I've been around for 55 years and none of them have panned out, and that's just how it is. And I'm like, all right, that's fine. And then you just have to find a way to cut around and do that. And so, for us, there's purpose in how we've built for professionals and amateurs first, before going into like the other aspects of like either, veterinary or those kind of, or like even like the livestock side of things. That's kind of like been our purpose and how we've built. And so for me, I'm like, I'm buckling up for this to be my life's work. Where I think a lot of people who start a startup is because they're like, I want to get rich and I want to get there fast. And that's just like it's not my mindset here. Again, I'm lucky enough that I have that ability to do that. I'm lucky enough that, I've got other contracts and things going on, and there's other income coming in. Because this is not making an impact in the horse industry will never happen for anybody overnight. It won't happen for horse trainers. It won't happen for farriers. It won't happen for supplement companies. It just won't happen. And so you have to find that team that's willing to lock in for 15, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, that's the same advice we were given about podcasts. I think that something similar to that, 90% or so fail. But you touched on a good point there. Part of failing is it's quitting, right? Like people don't follow through. So I remember hearing one time, if something isn't worth waking up every day and working at to the best of your ability without it ever coming to fruition, then it's not worth doing at all. Because what are you doing,
I
right?
think it's like that ability to know that you can pivot. I think my life so far, I'm young, right? I'm 26. I don't really know anything about living yet, but I've learned a couple of things. And my life so far has just been like pivoting. It's like, all right, I'm going to head down this avenue for a little bit, and then you hit a roadblock, and it's like, okay, do I chip away at this roadblock, or do I pivot to find success in a new avenue? And somehow it's all been connected. I think there's also like this idea of like, what are you working towards? And I want to make an impact in the horse industry because I cared deeply about it. But I also just want to live my life knowing that I worked on things that I gave a shit about, that I cared about. I think of my dad a lot. in that aspect. You know, I learned a lot from my dad. He only owned a feed store, but it was like so much more. And he passed away really suddenly about a month ago. But my dad, he worked hard his whole life at feed stores. That's all he did. He just worked in livestock supply. But he was working on something that he cared about. Like my dad really cared about livestock, and he cared about feed and nutrition. But he chose something that would allow him to work on what he loved. But he also took the time to live and enjoy life. And right. And he was like, this is what I'm going to do to be able to enjoy my family, to be able to enjoy people, to be able to take the vacations that I want to take, to be able to live the life that I want to live. And I'm very grateful that my dad got to live that way, because at the end of the day, he died when he was 59 years old. And so that option of retirement, right, and live in your golden years, that wasn't something that came to fruition for him. But I live with no sadness surrounding that, because I know my dad lived a good life. And that's really kind of my theory around work is maybe I will never get rich doing this. But I honestly love what I'm doing. There is nothing cooler than getting to log onto my laptop and work to design screens for an event management system. There's nothing cooler than, yeah, we only have a couple hundred customers, but of those couple hundred customers, I've had 50 of them be like, fuck, you've made planning lessons that much easier for me. And so it's like, that to me is worth it. And I still get to ride my horses every day, and going to horse shows is considered work. And I get to gather kind of information on what I'm building. And so I feel like really happy with it. I'm like, you know what? You're right. It might fail and we might close up shop, and I will just pivot to doing something else that I really, really like. And that's, I think that's one of the things that'll kind of help in building a successful company, either in this avenue or in when we build a different product, because we figured out that one just didn't work.
Yeah, I know you said you're really young, but it seems like you've had, the benefit obviously of a great dad, but also, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the industry you work in, there's a prevalent attitude that, being broke doesn't mean you're poor. So you might be broke and then you pivot and you do something else. And maybe if you grow up as the kid of a, small town carpenter or a horse trainer, or I don't know, maybe a different dad, if he was a feed store owner, would have a different mentality. You grow up, and if things aren't working out, it's like, oh, well, maybe you're just failing in life, or you picked the wrong thing. And it's like a negative thing. Whereas something I notice in you, even as young as you are, you've really established that mentality that, like, if things aren't working, it's an indicator. It's not failure. It's like if you're driving your vehicle and you're empty on fuel, it's like, oh, it's just time to get fuel, or it's time to check the oil. It's not like, oh shit, I got to throw my car away. It's just an indicator, and it's time to pivot. And I love your attitude, because that's something that's easy to forget. I think people that work in an industry that's smaller or very narrow-minded, or maybe you have a small friend group, or everyone's so focused on one outcome, and they forget that, well, maybe they're not enjoying life even. So everything's so focused on one goal that any sort of disruption or failure is so catastrophic. And I think you've really developed a good attitude at a young age of being like, well, I guess we'll just do something else, or let's find better people, or we'll just change. It's not the end of the world, because if this isn't working, that's a good sign. We'll do it different.
Yeah. I think, I give a lot of credit to my dad. I mean, so much of how I view life is because of my father. And, he was this kind of wonderful example to me of the American dream. My grandparents came from Mexico through the Bracero program. They had nothing but 15 kids. And, my dad, he came from nothing. When people talk about poor or people talk about broke, they don't know poor or broke, but my dad did. I mean, he knew poverty. And I always say he never took anything from anyone or the universe but the opportunity to work hard. And that's what he did his whole life. And he was just simple. I would love to embrace the simplicity and love for life that my father had, because he really didn't need much but an opportunity to work hard. And he lived a very fulfilled life, and he loved people, and he loved the people around him, and he went fishing, and he had a great fucking time all the time, and he drank beer, and he ate the food that he liked to eat. And that was the concept of things. And when I was young, I've always been extremely hard on myself. Like, comments on the internet could never hurt me because I've probably already said it to myself and 10 times worse. And I would always kind of be like scared to do shit because I was like really scared to fail, or I was just like scared of what people would think. And my dad, very simple, and it's really stupid, but I like live by it. He would just go, rock and roll. Like, that was it. He'd be like, fuck it. Like, just rock and roll. What are you going to do? What is anybody going to do but judge you for trying your absolute best? And he was so supportive of everybody around him, not just me. I was his only kid, but he had a million others. And, I was talking like at his funeral, I said, you could have thrown your rope in the dirt, hit all 3 barrels in the gate guy on the way out, and my dad still could have found something good that you did that day. And he would always just say, well, just try again. That's all you can do, is just try again. And so it's like, why would I live life miserably because every day I'm not having a grand success? When you think about the most successful people in the world who have accomplished such incredible things, oftentimes we boil them down to one singular accomplishment on one singular day, but we forget the fact that they lived an entire life before that. And so for me, it's like, I always tell people, find your North Star and pursue it relentlessly, but exist with the knowledge that it's not going to be a straight line to get there. And so I can either live life every single day miserably because I haven't gotten to my North Star yet, or I can understand the fact that like, I'm purely lucky that I'm getting to do what I love to do, and I'm getting to take a chance and take risks rather than having to do something mundane that I absolutely fucking hate. Because there's a lot of people in the world who they can't take risks, because taking risks is literally like, if they fail, they don't have a roof over their head. And I'm gifted the ability to fail. And so that's just like my genuine feeling, is like, at the end of the day, I just want to enjoy my life. And while every day is not fantastic, it's a lot better than most. And I always think like, I want to live a life that made my grandparents' sacrifice and decision to come to America worth it. Cause it didn't end with them. That risk didn't end with them. It carries on to me. So that's just like, that's how I feel, like just work hard, figure out the things you like. And then if you stop liking that thing, fucking find something else. Who knows? Maybe in 10 years I won't own a horse and all I'll be doing is like gardening or something like that. But if I really like it, like, why not?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great attitude.
So here's another picture that I'm envisioning in my head after hearing your whole story. How was it being the girl who was the rodeo queen and their dad ran a feed store and you grew up, barrel racing and stuff. And then you go and you make your living in Silicon Valley. 'Cause that's the opposite of everything I just described, at least in my mind. Yeah. And again, I'm not, I've spent quite a lot of time in San Jose, and I felt like someone who's from Southern Appalachia. I felt like I just landed on the moon. Yeah. So obviously you navigated it well, and things have worked out, but it just feels like
it that well.
Well, I didn't say navigate it well by their standards. I meant by, your standards. It looks like things are working out for you now.
I think one of my, I don't want to call it a regret, but this one took, me getting a little bit older and analyzing. And I detached myself from everything that I knew and everything that I was in order to fit in Silicon Valley. And when I moved there, I went way the other way for a couple of years. I think one, I detached myself because I thought that in order to fit in and find success amongst those people, I was going to need to hide the fact that, I was a feed store owner's daughter who just, rodeoed and kind of just showed up on the scene one day. Like I said, like I didn't even rodeo. I literally started writing English. Like I just fully detached. I wasn't friends with those same people anymore. And I didn't even like go to any rodeos. I didn't go to any jackpots. Like I didn't even talk to anybody. I was very far detached. And at points, sometimes I'll look at myself and I'm like, man, I really regret who I was during that time in my life. Because I had a huge opportunity to represent the community that I'm from. And instead I tried to pretend that I wasn't from there. But on the same aspect of things, I'm incredibly happy that I took that massive step away. And I chose to live a completely different life. One, because I'll have no regrets in being like looking back and being like, man, when I was in my 20s, I really wanted to live in a city and I didn't, because I did it. Two, I met people that were from such wildly different walks of life who I probably would have absolutely hated as a child and as a young adult because of the way in which they perceive the world. But instead I became much more understanding of the way in which they see the world. And if anything, it has now made me an even better advocate for my community when I walk into more urban communities. But three, it also reaffirmed the way that I want to live my life. It reaffirmed that for me, I enjoy living more rural. I enjoy my more rural friends. I enjoy going to barrel races every single weekend and going to, ranch rodeos and doing all those things. It kind of really reaffirmed that. And so, when I say I didn't navigate it well, I guess it's that I didn't integrate my personality well, my real personality and who I really was well into that portion of my life. But now in more urban settings, I'm very proud of the way in which I live my life. And, when investors will ask, like, investors oftentimes really want founders to be like very into their startup. And obviously I really am. But at the end of the day, like when I wake up every morning, I still have stalls to clean. I've still got horses to ride and horses to feed. And that's always going to be, one of the more important factors of my life. And so it was definitely interesting. Because I basically just like pretended like I wasn't from where I was from. But of course, like we have to kind of go through that ebb and flow of life. But, I do feel like now it really gives me an advantage of kind of understanding both sides of things and almost like being able to chameleon myself, and, understand both communities and kind of work both communities. But it definitely reaffirmed that, like, I'm like, man, I would rather just live in the middle of nowhere and never talk to anybody ever again and have bad internet. I have such a love for cities, but, I really enjoy how I live my life. And I guess I just needed that like exploration time period. And I always tell people like, especially for like rodeo, I talk more about like the arena side of things rather than like the ranching side of things, like, cause that's the community that I feel I have the right to speak more towards. Cause I come from the arena side of things. I feel like so many people are really afraid of stepping away from the arena. They're really afraid of not rodeoing. I've talked to a lot of girls who are like, man, I really want to go live in New York and I really want to go live in here and I really want to do this. And I'm like, well, go. And they're like, but I don't want to step away from the arena. And I go, Jesus Christ. Rodeo will be there when you get back. At the end of the day, Salinas is going to happen every summer and jackpots are going to happen every single weekend and they're never going to go away. But time is fleeting. And so take that opportunity, go do the thing, go see the world. I traveled all over the world and I got to have these great jobs. And I was sad when I would see my friends were college rodeoing and jackpotting and doing all of these things. But one, I built an opportunity for myself that now I can go to jackpots and lose money and I don't have to worry about it. But two, it was right there when I got back. Like, I bought a horse again. I showed right back up to the jackpots. About 15 people went, "What the hell are you doing here?" I said, "I'm back. I'm back." And it was like the same jackpot had just happened the week prior, but it was when I graduated in 2015. So yeah, I always I urge people, I'm like, just step away from the arena, because I promise it'll be there when you get back. And thank God this community has been like incredibly welcoming, that all the friends I had in high school are still my friends today.
You know, it's interesting to hear you talk about all that. And I want to keep diving into kind of where this has all led you now, but I can definitely relate into what you're talking about. So for me personally, I grew up on a ranch here, and when I was a little kid, I can remember like telling my mom, this is like what I want to do. Like, I'd be horseback and like helping my dad, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I love this. And it was kind of from several outside forces and my parents to a certain extent. It was kind of frowned upon. They're like, no, because my mom was a trainer and my dad was a rancher, and they're like, no, you're not going to do anything related to this industry at all. Like, you know, if you want to just like sit on a horse the rest of your life, like, you're just going to be poor and you're not going to like, that can be your decision. And so, you know, I was fortunate. I was kind of the same way. School came really easy to me, and then got the opportunities to be able to afford college and go get an engineering degree. And I got like pretty much all the way through it. And I kind of looked up and I was like, oh, now I have to go get a job. And I don't want to do this at all. And so at that point, I just went and I did it for a while. And, you know, kind of a similar situation to you. Probably one of the things that's most alluring, especially when you're very young and fresh out of school, is the paycheck that comes with it. And you're like, oh, all this money, so this is great. So yeah, I should do that. And then it took a couple years, and it was like, you know, this is what I felt like I was told to do for me. And then, but this sucks. Like, this is not what I want to do at all. And so then I, you know, eventually transitioned to, you know, like today I rode all our client horses and we processed the yearling bulls for our sale in 2 months. And like, that's what I did with my day. And it was awesome. Like, that's what I wanted to do with my day. So, but during that time, like when I went to school, and I was like you, I still had horses, kind of in the background, but I did I wouldn't say I became a different person, but I definitely took on kind of different sensibilities. Like, I didn't draw back on kind of that foundation I had in terms of, you know, like a kind of rural agricultural upbringing. And, you know, I wouldn't say I lost my way or anything, but there is kind of like a lifestyle and like values that line up with that. And then I went to college and I was like, okay, I'm just ready to reinvent myself. And I don't even think like who I reinvented myself as was bad, but it just wasn't true to myself, you know? And so to come full circle on that, now that I do get to ride horses for a living, I don't think I would appreciate it the same way if I hadn't been through all of that. And like you said, you know, if you manage it right, you can set yourself up to where you have some like opportunity to fail and kind of strike up on your own and try some different things. But that is, I mean, that's kind of like that song, like God Bless the Broken Road. Like, you have to come all the way around to really appreciate where you're at. Because if you just go straight there, like, it's easy to think like, man, if I just knew from the get-go this is what I wanted to do, I could have gotten here in a straight line. It's like, yeah, but being here and appreciating being here are two very different things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely resonate with a lot of what you're saying, because it is tempting to, especially at that age, to kind of cast away who you are. Because, I mean, gosh, how many times do you get a chance to reinvent yourself in your life, like completely?
Yeah.
And so, when you get to do it, maybe you take on some good qualities with this new person you've become, and then you have to get back to the old. But I know initially, like when I kind of had a similar feeling. So I quit my job. I put in my 2 weeks notice, and man, after like that laptop closed, I felt like I could float away. Like it was the best feeling in the world. It was like
Yeah.
freedom. But but at the same time, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well now it's all me. Like I don't have a playbook anymore, and I have to really become who I want to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, clearly you're not bashful about being who you want to be, so that's a good thing. But the fact that you are 26 and have the perspective you have on it is really good. It's something not everyone has, and I mean, so we're all pretty close to the same age. So I'm 28. Ben, you're 27, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're 26. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
kind of all in that clump right there, kind of stage of life. That I don't know. People tell us, other people who are a lot older than us tell us that Ben and I have a good perspective on things, but who knows? 5 years down the road, we could be like,
Yeah.
wow,
I think
we
like
have all these recordings of us being idiots now.
no, I know. I say that all the time. I'm like, I feel at every stage of my life, I have felt extremely confident in the person that I was, which helped me get to the next level. And then I look back all the time and I'm like, what the fuck were you doing? But I exist with the knowledge that even in 5 years, I'm going to look back again and I'm going to be like, oh my God, that is so horrific. That is so horrendous. But in every stage, I'm like, well, I just have to exist confidently with who I am because it's like the world will tear you down all on its own. And so you might as well spend more time liking yourself and at least being confident in the dumbass that you are, rather than hating yourself at the same time that, the reality of life is trying to tear you down. So it's like, yeah, I always kind of just try to march to the beat of my own drum. And then I always like kind of reaffirm with my friends. I'm like, well, I'm not problematic, right? I'm just loud. And they're like, yeah, not problematic. I'm like, okay, as long as as long as I don't have cancelable offenses in my beliefs, I'm gonna rock and roll with it. And then I will continue to evolve and change, as I get older, because that's literally all one person can do is just like continue getting better. Or I'm sure there's periods of my life where I'll be worse and then I'll hop back on it. But it's like your 20s are hard. You might as well try to have at least a good mindset in it, or else they're just going to swallow you whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joe, I think you touched on something really good, though, because I was listening to you guys, and you guys both have a little different story than I do. And so it's fun listening to your journeys. But you said that you got to a point where you realized what you were doing felt more like you were doing what you were told to do rather than what you want to do. And yeah, I mean, obviously we're all in our 20s and we're not going to figure it all out, certainly not in this conversation. And we're not going to write the prescription and live by it for the rest of our life. And we can encourage and help our friends out, but we can't really give them anything concrete necessarily. But it's little things like that. I mean, Joe, I remember a long time ago, you told me that I'd said something and you're like, oh yeah, there you go. Awareness is half the battle. And I always laugh about that to myself because you're so right about that. And even when you realized you were doing, what you were told to do, just that awareness. And so, and like you're saying, Michelle, like you don't know where you'll be in 5 years and you don't know how things are going to work out. And you're certainly not at the end of your life looking back. We're at the beginning of our life looking forward. But learning to have awareness now is huge. And just that distinction. I don't know that I've ever had that feeling of just doing what I was told to do. Maybe I have, but I know some other feelings. And so I'm very thankful for where I'm at as well. But I think that's a really important thing to recognize is no matter what you're doing, whether you're making money or you're getting more broke, as time goes on, whatever stage you're at in building your life, are you doing what you want to do, or are you just living somebody else's dream, or living some like prison sentence, basically? I'm sure there's people listening to this that have a job or have a trajectory where, like currently, if they really stop and think about it, maybe they've never even really thought about what they want to do. Or maybe they're just living out their parents' dream, or they're living out some friend of theirs' dream, or maybe their boss's dream, or maybe they're just not even living anybody's dream. They're just kind of like, they're just living. And maybe listening to you, like they'll take some time. And I think that's what Joe and I try to do. We talk about our life, we talk to people, and it helps us. And I don't know what everyone else gets out of it, but I'm sure some people will stop and think and go, wait a minute, am I doing what I want to do? Or, maybe I'll keep doing this for another year, but then I should think about what's next. Because if you don't think about what's next, it'll sneak up and get you. And I know
Yeah.
I'm 27 today, but someday I'll wake up and I'll be 77,
Yeah.
And so we're all going to get there. It's not going to go faster or slower depending on how I live my life, but it will come like a thief in the night if I'm not thinking about what's next. And why am I doing this again? Did I want to do this? Or am I doing what, corporate said? Or am I doing what so-and-so, like the trap you can fall in? So now you work for yourself maybe, but then the next trap you can fall in is like, what will people think about me? And now you're working for people that aren't even paying you. And, and have no control over your life. And that's something else you talked about. You were saying you've had more people, tell you to go screw yourself than congratulate you or encourage you. But that's really important and you can't just work for the folks that encourage you either. But boy, all those people that are negative, you can end up living out, their vision, and they really have no bearing on your life, but you allow it. So I think that's really important. Like, we can't figure it all out at our age, but you can certainly be aware. And that's something I try to do more and more all the time.
I think that's where like the importance of like community comes out. I think, people our age are really worried about being liked by everyone, and by not offending anyone, and in existing, just very evenly, and being perceived well in the eyes of many. And I think, my whole life I've been hyper aware of that. I am not everybody's cup of tea. I will never discount anybody for being like, yeah, that one is, she's kind of a lot. But what I am really thankful for every single day is I do have this really core group of people who do believe in me. I wake up every day and I'm very thankful that I have really awesome and amazing friends. I have an awesome partner. I have awesome co-founders, and curating that group of people was not easy. I tell people that all the time. I'm like, I have great friends because I was extremely selective in those that I give my time to. And I'm extremely selective in that I love people who are going to be honest with me. I was just saying that today, like about my best friend, Erica. She is never afraid to be like, yeah, dude, that was not cool. Like, you should really work on that part of your personality. I think we need to, refrain from doing that again. And so, I've picked people who critique me in like the best way possible. And I think that's a huge thing to success. Is like, I tell people all the time, like, you are who you surround yourself with. If you surround yourself with a bunch of people who are also choosing to live life within complacency, or choosing to not, always be striving for the next thing, that doesn't mean surround yourself with millionaires, and only millionaires, but like surround yourself with people who give a shit about what they're doing and where they're going, because they're only going to push you to be that much better. Like I say about my co-founders, I pick them because they're 10 times smarter than me, and they're always willing to be like, hey, you got to up your skills, dude. You got to step it up. You need to be that much better tomorrow when you show up again. And that really helps you get through life, because like in life, there's going to be people that'll tell you no. And if you have that really strong community of people who, there are lots of days where even though I'm as positive as I am about the mission that I'm on, there are lots of days where I'm like, this is never going to work. Like, this is never going to work. And I don't know why I'm doing this. I was making so much money corporate. I should just go back. And I've chosen the people around me so well that they're like, dude, shut up. Like, you've come so far just to give up. And they remind me of the purpose that I always say that I have. And I think that's really important, is like always remembering that you're not in this fight alone. I feel like hustle culture, I really don't like it. Hustle culture is always like, oh, it's eat or be eaten, and it's everybody against you, and you just gotta wake up every day. And it's like, okay, if you only surround yourself with naysayers and you find that that's all you have around you, maybe you should analyze who you are as a person, and get better friends, because you can't get anywhere without a strong community of people behind you. And like, I 100% stand by anywhere that I am in life, anywhere that I've gotten, I have only gotten there because I have incredible people around me who have just gone and raised me right up to the positions that I'm in. And so it's like, I will never like be like, oh, I took sole credit. And I've worked hard, 100%. I've worked really hard. And I've taken advantage of the privileges that I have and the opportunities that I have, but I'm only in the positions that I'm in because I chose really good people. And I think like that's such an important part of your 20s that a lot of people forget, is like a lot of people spend their 20s surrounding themselves with not good people that don't actually care about their success. And I think that can really like shape your kind of mindset. And those can also be the people that are like, yo, dude, wake up. Are you doing what really makes you happy? Because I know my friends do that to me all the time. They're like, are you really happy? And I'm like, I think so. I think I'm on the right path. And they're like, all right, then keep on keeping on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Michelle, so I don't know how much you knew about us before I reached out to you. But what you described just there is kind of where we took inspiration for the name of our podcast, On the Move. And it's actually, it was in the first episode we sat down and like decided what we were going to name it. That's our first episode. And we wanted to talk about, kind of, for lack of a better term, maybe a mantra for what we want to talk about on here, who we want to get involved with the podcast, etc. And On the Move, we want to be around people who are on the move, who are trying to get better. Again, not trying to tear people down, not talking about what can't be done and what isn't possible, but people who are like, well, how can I get better at this? And it can be, we got to talk to you, we've talked to trainers and farriers and veterinarians, and whatever it is, whatever their craft or their sector of life is, they're on the move. They're trying to think about how they can be better, about what they can do to make their peers better. Generally, I'd say that's probably a pretty common theme, wouldn't you say, Ben? And everything you just described is very much in line with that thought process, that mantra, and the title of this podcast.
Nice. Did it.
Yeah, no, you nailed it.
Proved myself as a guest.
So all that being said, talking about how it's not important to be liked by a bunch of people and all those other good values, how do Ben and I become wildly successful on TikTok?
Oh, dude, I tell people that I just made a TikTok about this last week. It was
about how to be successful on TikTok.
Yeah. No,
because I made a TikTok. Like we made a TikTok account 8 days ago. We've been going for like a year and a half, something, and we're on like Instagram and Facebook. And I finally got on TikTok just because, basically my fiance, she works in marketing, and she pressured me to get a TikTok for the podcast because she was like, you can go way more viral on TikTok than you can anywhere else. So now we're on TikTok. So how do I do it? You're
from like a marketing perspective, podcasts are great because like a lot of the time in podcasts, it might be a 1 hour episode, but you'll get like those really short snippets where something like says something quite revolutionary, or they just say something that's really fucking funny. But I made this TikTok last week because, I see these like 10 to 30,000 follower accounts all the time that are like, let me give you like the secret sauce to like blowing up on TikTok. And then they'll be like, okay, well, you want to take this like 8-second sound and like put some text on the video. And I'm like, genuinely, shut the fuck up. That's a good way to get like 3 million views on one singular video, but that's not how you're going to grow a community. And so I like made this TikTok and I was like, one, have a personality. If you don't have a personality, like, don't worry, you're still capable of going viral. The other like 2 ways to grow a great community is either like be really hot or be super rich. And if you have all 3 infinity stones, then you're Alex Earl. But I genuinely think like one of the greatest things about TikTok, and a lot of the times where you see like accounts that are, really successful. And obviously, like, I don't have millions of followers. I've got like 350,000, which is still like I say that I love existing in the $350,000 follower range, because I'm not big enough that I have a snark page on Reddit. And everybody hates me. I'm just like small enough where people are still nice to me and say nice things. And it gives me opportunities to like kind of do cool stuff. But like people love a good value add. I always laugh when people are like, I love the advice you give, because oftentimes I'm like, yo, I'm literally a playbook for like, watch me do it first and then be like, yeah, probably a terrible idea. Don't do that one. But yeah, it's like, I've actually really loved TikTok for kind of like what we're talking about like finding good people and just like being wholeheartedly yourself. Is like, that's been my favorite thing. Like, obviously, like there's people that don't like me. Like I've had people genuinely comment like, man, you just bug the shit out of me. And I'm like, I get that 100%. I don't know why you had to tell me. It kind of made me feel bad for a second, but like, I get it. But then it's at the same time, like for every like bad comment, I'll get like 10 direct messages from girls who are like, man, I haven't entered a jackpot in 4 years. And last week I finally went to like the Friday night jackpot, because my motto in life is always just rock and roll. And like, if you want to do something, go do it, even if you're not going to be very good at it. And even if it's momentarily embarrassing. And like, that's kind of been like the value add for me, is like, I guess just inspiring people, to just do it. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? Like, when it comes to embarrassment, I always tell people, when you do something really embarrassing, people are going to talk about it for about 24 hours, and then they move on to something embarrassing that somebody else did. But you still gained the experience that'll last you a lifetime. And that's like pretty much how I feel about all things in life. What you believe was very embarrassing really wasn't that embarrassing. And people who are doing better than you will never say anything negative to you. And that's really been the great part of TikTok for me, is like, I've met an incredible community, and I've got a lot of people that support my ventures and back me. And, even in losing my dad, the online community has been so incredibly supportive in allowing me to grieve and share stories about my dad and how incredible he was. And they're like, man, I love stories about your dad. I love hearing about him. I loved hearing about him when he was alive, and I love it even more hearing about him now that he's gone. And so yeah, like TikTok, I always tell people, like, don't call me a TikToker, but it's been an incredible community, and I don't make a ton of money from it, but I gain so much more in life, and I hope that I'm able to give people a little bit of value back, or at least make them laugh when they're having a shitty day.
Hey, well, Michelle, let's go ahead and we'll wrap this thing up. We can even chat a little bit more after we're done. But before we go, tell our listeners about Bridal, how they can find it, and also if there's anywhere else you'd like people to check out what you're doing, go ahead and tell them now, and then we'll wrap up.
So for Bridal, you can find us on either the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. If you just look up Bridal Equine Management, you'll see us. We're a little purple logo with a horse. Or you can go to getbridal.com. and find us there and sign up and see demos and all of those sorts of things. And our emails are there. I always tell people just to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to hop on personal Zoom calls to walk people through the product. Or on every platform, of course, you can find me at Broadcast Horse Girl. I'm mainly just active on Instagram and TikTok, though sometimes people do find me on Facebook, and I just accept everybody. But my posts are always like asking like any barrel races next week. That's like the extent of me posting on Facebook. But yeah, that's where you guys can find me. And DMing me on Instagram is not the good way to get a hold of me. But I do have, links in my bio and everything like that. And we try to be as responsive as possible.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much for doing this. I've had a great time. And
yeah, me too.
If there's anything else you got, Joe, we can we'll wrap up.
No, I really appreciate you getting back to us, because I know it's not a great way to get a hold of you, but DMing you on Instagram is how we got a hold of you.
Yeah,
so,
it did work.
Yeah, so it did work for us.
Back, but no, it definitely worked. And I had spotted the podcast, and I was like, I like to pay attention to things. So I was like, oh, so when you guys DM'd, I was like, heck yeah, I'll go on.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime there's a plane taking off at extreme trajectory, a lot of times people are like, wow, where are they going? I'm kidding.
Yeah. Any chance for me to run my mouth for 2 hours, and I'm like, I'm on, man. Get me on that bus immediately.
Yeah.
So.
Well, no, it's great. Ben and I have gotten a lot better at this, but I wouldn't call either of us professionals. And maybe we should take some tips from you on the whole speaking deal. But man, when we started this, we were abysmal. We were TikTok duds because, we didn't have a lot of personality. We weren't very hot. And as far as I know, we don't have a bunch of money. So, so we were 0 for 3 on your criteria there.
Well, I always scope out, like, I get a lot of podcasts reaching out to me, and I really honestly do like very few of them. If I feel like the conversation isn't gonna go well, or like be why have a conversation if it's not going to be a good one?
Exactly.
But yeah.
So that's one, like Joe said, like we might not be great at what we do, but one thing we detest is manufactured conversations. Like, we're not going to email you like a list of stuff we're going to talk about and pictures, and like, this is us like having fun, and people are lucky enough to listen. And I guess if we're boring, then we're no fun. But
no, I can't.
There is something to that, right? Though, like, when the camera turns on, it is still hard to act like it's just the three of us. But you get
the clickbaity. Yeah, it's like I can't even. I'm like the queen of derailing. Like, podcasters who like to really stick to like a set list, I'm like, yo, we cannot hang out, because I will derail for literally years. We could be here for 8 hours and not get to the things we wanted to talk about because so many other things came up. But yeah, so it's an A+ from me.
Cool. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this, but don't go anywhere.
Okay, I won't leave.
Hey, On the Move listener. Have you been following us on social media? Have you been watching the video format of the podcasts? If so, you've probably noticed by now that we have On the Move merch. I'm wearing one of our hats right now. The first order of hats we did flew off the shelves, and we've only got a handful left in each style. But we're doing another order, and if you want to pre-order your On the Move hat today, go to www.onthemovepodcast.com. There you'll find our Shopify store with hats, mugs, stickers, and other merch. Get it just in time for the holiday season, and let everyone know that you're on the move.